and welcome to the virtual worship service of Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church, or BBUUC. Ours is a welcoming and curious faith, interest in learning about ideals and faiths other than our own. To learn more about our church, you can visit bbuuc.org, and to learn more about Unitarian Universalism, you can visit uua.org for more information. David Foster Wallace says, "Here is just one example of the total wrongness of something I tend to be automatically sure of. Everything in my own immediate existence supports my deep belief that I am the absolute center of the universe, the realest, most vivid and important person in existence. We rarely think about this natural, basic self-centeredness because it's so socially repulsive, but it's pretty much the same for all of us. It's our default setting, hardwired into our boards at birth. Think about it. There is no experience you have had that you are not the absolute center of. The world as you experience it is there in front of you, behind you, to the left or right of you, on your TV or your monitor, and so on. Other people's thoughts and feelings have to be communicated to you somehow, but your own are so immediate, urgent, real. The really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline, and being able to truly care about other people and sacrifice for them over and over in petty, unglamorous ways every day. That is real freedom. That is being educated and understanding how to think. The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant growing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing."
Hello, everyone. I'm Nick. I'm going to be reading our chalice words today, which come from Reverend Lisa Doge. Why a flaming chalice? The question comes. It's the cup of life, we answer. A cup of blessings overflowing. A cup of water to quench our spirit's thirst. A cup of wine for celebration and dedication. The flame of truth, fire of purification. Oil for anointing, healing. Out of chaos, fear, and horror, thus was the symbol crafted a generation ago. So may it be for us in these days of uncertainty, sorrow, and rage, and a light to warm our souls and guide us home.
Good morning. It is so good to be together. I wonder what could be in our Wonder Box today. Do you have a guess? Let's see. Earphones. What are earphones good for? What do you think? Did I hear somebody say listening? I think you might be on the right track. Today, Reverend Carmen is going to speak about listening, really listening with our whole body and our whole heart. Sometimes we can be so tied up in our own stories, in our own heads, that it makes it difficult to hear other people's. I want to share an adapted story with you about talking and listening by Christiane Jones called Lacey Walker, Non-Stop Talker. And it goes something like this. Lacey Walker was quite the little talker. She liked to talk and talk and talk. At lunchtime, her mom would say, "Lacey, please stop talking and eat your lunch." And at school, her very aggravated teacher would say, "Lacey Walker, less talking and more listening, please." In the evening, her brother would shout, "Lacey, please stop talking. I can't hear my movie." Lacey's dad sighed every night and said, "Honey, stop talking and just brush your teeth." But nothing could quiet little Lacey. She talked and talked and talked. But on one gloomy Monday morning, all that talking caught up with her. Lacey Walker lost her voice. She tried to whisper, she tried to shout, she tried to sing, but nothing happened. Lacey moped through breakfast. However, it didn't take her nearly as long to eat since she couldn't talk. Lacey even had time to finish her homework. "I'm really on a roll this morning," she thought. And then Lacey moped on her walk to school. However, she realized her friend Nadine told great jokes and was really funny. Odd. I've never noticed that before. Lacey moped all day at school. However, she finished all her work and she got a gold star for listening. I've never gotten a gold star before, she thought. And that night, Lacey wasn't quite as mopey. She grabbed a snack and watched a monster movie with her brother. And you know what? He was right, she thought. This movie is awesome. And when her dad came upstairs, Lacey was already in bed. She had on her PJs, she'd brushed her teeth, and she was just waiting for story time. They had so much time, they even got to read 2 extra books. The next morning, Lacey woke up feeling great. Not only could she talk again, but she could whisper, and she could shout, and she could sing. This is the best day ever, Lacey declared. And Lacey raced downstairs to talking the entire way. Oh my goodness, I have so much to say. Nadine is hilarious. Gold stars are the best. And I like monster movies. But first, I'm going to eat my breakfast, said Lacey with a smile. And Lacey quietly ate her breakfast. And she listened to her family talk. Lacey Walker still liked to talk and talk and talk, but she learned that she liked to listen just as much. Have you ever had a friend like Lacey who talked and talked and talked? Have you ever been like Lacey? How do you feel when you want to share a story about your day with someone and it doesn't seem like they're listening to you? Does it make you feel sad? Do you get frustrated? How do you feel when someone stops and really listens to you? Do you feel respected? Do you feel loved? Fully listening to someone with our whole self shows kindness and compassion and respect for the inherent worth and dignity of their story. I wonder, who can you be a good listener for this week? And with that, my story is told. Until next time.
Now is the time in our service when we offer our joys and our sorrows to one another, because joys shared can be magnified and sorrows shared can be lessened. We light a candle of concern for Sandra M.'s daughter, Stephanie, who had recent kidney surgery and is battling pneumonia. She seems to be improving and has a good, positive attitude. A candle of joy for 2 birthdays this week. Happy birthday to Judy O. on June 30th, and birthday wishes also to Darcy D., who celebrates her special day on July 6th. We light a candle of joy for our Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations General Assembly, which was held virtually this year from June 24th through today, the 28th. The theme this year is Rooted, Inspired, and Ready. We are in touch with our theological roots. We are engaged in transforming our faith, and we are fired up to take action in the wider world. And we light one final candle for all the joys and concerns that remain unspoken, but still in our hearts. You are what makes this church a community. During this challenging time, we remember that BBUUC is more than merely a building where we meet. It is each of us who make up this congregation. While we're unable to gather in person, we are exploring new ways to connect, to love, to serve, and to be with one another. During this time of uncertainty, we remain focused on our mission. We remain focused on maintaining our ministry, building and grounds, staff, and our shared values. While we are unable to pass the plate in person, we will gratefully accept your virtual offering. During the month of June, our weekly offering will be contributed to BLUU, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. BLUE is an independent organization fiscally sponsored by the UUA, led by an executive director, a community minister, and a volunteer organizing collective, which provides ministry for and by Black Unitarian Universalists, while also working to expand the role and visibility of Black UUs within our faith. To make an offering, simply go to the link on our PayPal Giving Fund on our YouTube channel and give any amount, whatever you are able to share. Your contributions are most appreciated. Reverend Carmen Emerson is the affiliated community minister for BBUUC. Her work as an ordained UU minister in full fellowship happens within the wider Jacksonville community, currently as a chaplain resident assigned to the palliative care team at Baptist Medical Center. Reverend Emerson's experience as a parish minister includes 10 years of full-time service to our UU congregations in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Meadville, Pennsylvania, and Nashville, Tennessee. Reverend Carmen, welcome.
Good morning, friends. Carmen Emerson here, the affiliated community minister for Buckman Bridge. I'm so pleased to be with you this morning, and as always, looking forward to the day when we can be in person together in our beautiful sanctuary. This morning, I want to talk to you about the sacred art of listening, and just invite you to settle in, be comfortable, and hear the story of the sacred art of listening. I began this morning, as I often do, with the wisdom of poets and storytellers and theologians. The universe is made of stories, not atoms, wrote poet Muriel Rukeyser. Her thoughts are echoed by the storyteller Barry Lopez, who writes, "Everything is held together with stories. That is all that is holding us together, stories and compassion." Perhaps this is why theologian Paul Tillich counseled, "The first duty of love is to listen." The universe is made of stories. Everything is held together with stories and compassion. The first duty of love is to listen. And if I add my wisdom to this litany, here's the one thing I know without a doubt to be true. There is always more to the story. There is always more to our stories. There is always more to your story. Let me illustrate. Imagine with me an ordinary stool. You know the kind, polished chrome, about 3 feet high, swivel seat, ubiquitous in every hardware and home goods store because they're sturdy and inexpensive and useful. Like many ordinary things, they get the job done. And then, imagine that such a stool is donated to the annual church garage sale by a kind and generous member of the congregation. You see him coming through the front door with it and thank him for his donation. You know it will go quickly because everyone can use a clean, good, sturdy stool like this. Things are moving so quickly, you take it from him so that it can be priced and stacked with other similar items, but he hesitates. He doesn't quite let go of this stool. "You know," he tells you, "I bought this stool when my mother came to live with us." And you vaguely remember that he and his husband cared for his mother several years before her death. He continues, "My mother would carefully balance on this stool and tilt her head back over the sink so that I could wash her hair." That's such a comforting feeling for many of us to have someone cradle our head, wash our hair. It's a very intimate moment, returns us to the dignity of feeling clean and cared for and looking our best. Do you remember washing the hair of your own child? Pause to consider the role reversal of an adult child cradling the head of their aging parent, washing downy hair as fine as a child's hair. Suddenly, that ordinary donation to the garage sale, that ubiquitous chrome swivel-seated stool that had already been mentally tagged for $5 is worth so much more, and not because it is the story, but because it gave you a chance to hear the story of someone you know and know even better now. There is always more to our stories. Our stories are fascinating, and of course, no one's story is as interesting as our own story, right? Recall the words from this morning's reading. Everything in my own immediate experience supports my deep belief that I am the absolute center of the universe, the realest, most vivid, and important person in existence. As David Foster Wallace noted in that reading, most of us have better social skills and manners than to actually tell people that their own thoughts and feelings and stories pale in comparison to our own. But the way we listen and the way we respond in conversation may betray our priorities. So hear that again. The way we listen and the way we respond in conversation may betray our priorities. In researching the power of our stories and our capacities for listening, I discovered this definition of conversation. See if it makes sense to you. Conversation is a vocal competition in which the person pausing to catch their breath is known as a good listener. Meanwhile, Barry Lopez encourages us toward a different understanding. Conversations are efforts towards good relations. They are an elementary form of reciprocity. They are the exercise of our love for each other. Conversations are the exercise of our love for each other. Conversations are the enemies of our loneliness, our doubt, our anxiety, our tendencies to abdicate. To continue to be in good conversation over our enormous and terrifying problems is to be calling out to each other in the night. If we attend with imagination and devotion to our conversations, says Lopez, we will find what we need, and someone among us will act. It does not matter whom, and we will survive. The power of stories and of listening. James Baldwin wrote about connecting and surviving through our stories too. You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, he says. But then you learn the stories of others, learn that the things that tormented me most were the very things that connected me with all the people who are alive, who have ever been alive. It's known as compassion. There is power in the telling of our stories when they are heard by people who can be trusted with them. Again, there is power in the telling of our stories when they are heard by people who can be trusted with them. Native peoples teach that when we are born and as we move through life, the stories of our lives are written across our foreheads. There's a problem with that. Have you figured it out? The problem is that we cannot read our own foreheads, and therefore we must learn to communicate with people who listen to us, truly listen to us, knowing that we can trust them to reflect our stories back to us. So, how do we become trusting and trustworthy of the life-giving, life-transforming, peacemaking stories among us? We learn to actively listen. We've heard from one theologian that the first duty of love is to listen. Others have written that active listening is the cardinal act of giving, the most important act of giving that we can offer to another human being, and ultimately the source of peace. From the Quaker tradition, whose services are conducted in silence and who engage in the practice of clearness committees or listening circles to help people in discernment, comes this wisdom: to listen another's soul into a condition of disclosure and discovery may be the greatest service that any human being ever performs for another. I want you to get this, to understand what a powerful and sacred act it is to truly attentively listen to another person with no other agenda than to hear them. To listen to another soul into condition of disclosure and discovery may be the greatest service that any human being ever performs for another. Friends, that is a profound opportunity and an obvious spiritual practice for Unitarian Universalists whose first religious principle is an affirmation of the inherent worth and dignity of every person. So, what do I mean by actively listening? To actively listen is to intentionally quiet our internal narrators who are busy in silent preparation for that moment when we finally get to respond. It takes energy to discipline our internal narrator into silence. It takes energy to keep self-reflection from becoming self-absorption. It takes energy to shepherd our full, undivided, undiluted attention toward another person. It takes energy and strength to hold their stories and their truths. Just hold them until such time as we are asked, if ever, to respond. Active listening is hard work, and I believe it is a sign of spiritual, ethical, moral, intellectual maturity. David Foster Wallace in this morning's reading said that our capacities for this kind of active listening, being able to truly care about other people and sacrifice for them, is real freedom, is being educated, is understanding how to think. And the alternative, he says, is unconsciousness, the default setting, the constant growing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing. I believe that for a time we have been witnessing and experiencing the consequences of some infinite and critical thing under grave threat by a reality show, technology-driven unconsciousness that brought us to the 2016 election, an unconsciousness that mistakes disconnection for independence. Let me say it again. An unconsciousness that mistakes disconnection for independence, an unconsciousness that mistakes self-absorption for self-reliance. I want to count on Unitarian Universalists to practice active listening as a way to help all of us reclaim and reinvigorate our consciousness, our connections, our appreciation for the stories of others, our understanding that independence is the grand myth and interdependence the truth of a meaningful life. Theologian David Augsburger explains why this is so important. Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person they are almost indistinguishable. Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person they are almost indistinguishable. When we feel heard, we feel loved. We have the courage to take risks in understanding others. Then understanding leads to transformation. Transformation is the work of a lifetime, and better done consciously, purposefully, by people whose intentions are towards justice and peace, rather than those who would manipulate us, count on us to default to fear and hopelessness because we are no longer connected, no longer trust one another to hear our stories, are not even aware of that infinite thing, and I would name that thing hope, that has been lost. The destiny of the world is determined less by battles that are lost and won than by the stories it loves and believes in. What larger narrative will we help to write by our active listening to the smaller narratives of those to whom we are or could be connected? In some ways, I've begun to think of our COVID-19 time as a time of redemption, and here's what I mean by that. We have been forced to slow down, and we don't take our time together for granted. The technology that lured some of us into the pace of unconsciousness, that distracted us from the art of sacred listening, is now offering us the opportunity to slow down. It doesn't work when everyone in a Zoom room talks at once, right? There has been some reclamation of the ebb and flow of speaking and listening that helps us hear and be heard. When we arrive at our new normal, do you think we'll miss the mute button we've learned to use in Zoom rooms? Maybe that can be a self-directed spiritual practice. To increase our capacities for active listening, I encourage you to spend some time each day in contemplative silence and self-reflection. The better you know yourself, the better able you are to quiet the demanding ego who leaves little room in heart and mind for the stories of others. When you have the chance, practice being fully present to the person trusting you with their story. This means that you are creating and holding a space of safety and respect for discernment and exploration. Again, that is a profound gift to offer to another person. One way to distinguish between actively preparing to respond and actively listening for the sake of hearing another person in their discernment, their disclosure, their discovery, is to ask yourself, what do I want to say? And what needs to be said? So the two questions are, what do I want to say? And what needs to be said? And then notice which question you feel compelled to answer. This is a simple and immediately doable spiritual and ethical practice that, like any muscle, strengthens day by day when you exercise it. What do I want to say? Or what needs to be said? If you're leaning towards what do I want to say, you're probably not engaged in active listening. Your ego is reclaiming your status as the center of the universe. If you're leaning towards answering the question, what needs to be said, an internal and maturing wisdom is reminding you that you have the honor, the privilege, the opportunity, and perhaps even the responsibility of reflecting an important part of the person's story back to them. God, I didn't say problem, solve, or fix. Just reflect what you've heard back to them. That is the sacred art of active listening. All human beings have an innate need to hear and tell stories and to have a story to live by, writes theologian Harvey Cox. And religion, whatever else it has done, he says, has provided one of the main ways of meeting this abiding need. Let ours be a religion, and let our congregations be religious communities who respond well to this abiding need of our shared and common humanity by practicing the sacred art of active listening. The practice is simple. What needs to be said, we ask ourselves. And then we stop talking, even inside our heads, so that we can actively listen. It is hard work. It is honorable work. It is transformative work, and therefore it is necessary work. The people of our city, our state, our nation, and our world are all in need of a good listening to. As Unitarian Universalists, may we be committed to and worthy of this transformative practice. May it be so, and may we be so together. Amen.
I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. My ears are wide open. My eyes are now open to see what I may be. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. I'm listening. I am listening. In this moment of Spirit, speaks through me. I can hear the voices of all my kind. I'm listening, singing. I'm listening, this tweeting and howling into the wind. My ears are wide open, oh, the joy. My eyes are wide open, oh, the love to see
That's
what
you
for you and me.
Oh,
I'm listening in this moment of silence.
I am listening.
I hear Spirit speak through me. Did you sleep well? Can I ask you a favor? Can you go and push with Jake for 5 minutes while I finish? You see I'm doing some worky stuff.
For 5 seconds?
5 minutes. You'll see how long. It's not very long.
How many seconds is 5 minutes?
Well, it's 300 seconds, but you don't have to count to 300. I'll just be in there to get you when I'm all done, okay?
So who's gonna have to count to 300?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Never has it been more true than now. We extinguish this flame, but the sparks within us remain alight. From each of us, in our supposed solitude, the signals buzz and hum, sparkling through space to one another, connecting us invisibly but palpably. We are one, and from every window our light shines. Thank you for joining us today. Go in peace. Namaste.